Hey YouTube, it's Avery Foster here. I'm doing a deck profile for the Top Deck Scrubs YouTube channel. Before I get to it, make sure to subscribe down low. Good guys run this channel, so definitely want to give them the popularity they deserve. This weekend I made top 32 at YCS Charlotte with Shaddoll Dogmatica. I'm not playing any invoked cards, I'm not playing any Despias, I'm not playing any of the conventional stuff. I'm literally just playing Shaddoll. How I came to the conclusion of this deck was because of the inclusion of this card, El Shaddoll Fusion, which is typically thought of as like one of the lesser fusion spells. This card's actually just the best card in the deck. As of right now, where we stand in this format, if you're able to activate a fusion spell during the draw phase, you can do so much. So being able to L in the draw phase gives you the ability to beat cards like Pandemonium, because it can only be activated in the main phase. It can beat the Fluanderee's trap card, only activatable in the main phase. It can beat DPE, which a lot of times people like to play around Super Poly, so they pop their own Verte, and then before you get Scythed, you can El Shaddoll during the draw phase before DPE comes back, and you can aerial them. So El Shaddoll Fusion is the main reason this deck is playable. But I can get to more of the reasons after that. Here we are. So we'll get into it. I played 42 cards in the main deck. The best starter card in the deck is 3 copies of Gale Dogra. This card is better than Nadir Servant. Not in it being more resilient to disruption or anything like that, but when both resolve, this card is a better card. So the reason this card is a better card is because it gives you an extra deck monster on the field, and it is an earth monster, and the extra deck monster it puts on the field actually kind of matters because that extra deck monster is Secure Gardener, because you'll end up going All Mirage Secure Gardener with this. That's important because one, it protects you from damage because Gale Dogra makes you pay life points. In case there was any doubt, so Gale Dogra's effect is paying 3,000 to send an extra deck monster to the graveyard from your extra deck, but the cool part about it is it's not once per turn. So typically turn 1 off this, you'll dump App Clone and Ash Dragon, and you can add Schism and then Ecclesia Fleur. So being able to summon the Secure Garden is really big for a couple reasons. Like 1, obviously life points are low, and 2, this has cool interactions versus cards like Lampseas, where they have to burn you to get like a full effect. Sometimes you can send other fusions to like add fusion spells back. So if you send like Random Construct, Shekinaga, stuff like that, it's important. But this being an Earth is actually very, very important because it being an Earth is the only reason that Gale Dogra by itself will beat the Prank Kid combo when they open a Brave starter, when not a lot of other starters in the game can say they do that like on their own. Because what you end up doing is they'll go activate right, get their card, summon token, and then they'll go normal summon a Prank Kid because they like to chain block their cards. They can add the equip spell, and the issue with this is a lot of people consider Shaddoll like, oh, it's a Winda deck. And it's really just not a Winda deck, because if you treat it like a Winda deck, your cards are just going to get outed by the equip spell and you get no value off your cards. So in reality, you don't really want to summon Winda very often in the first like turn or 2 of the game. You want to try and summon Winda like later on, because there are other cards you can actually get value off of while still interacting with your opponent, simplify the game state, then summon Winda and it's a bomb. So during the turn 1 where you summon this, you'll actually end up summoning Shekinaga to send their token and the equip spell to the graveyard. Then they hit a point where they just have a Prank Kid monster on the field because you chain the Schism to the effect of the, what's it called, the Fateful Adventure to add, so they won't be able to summon the Griffin because they'll have a Prank Kid monster on field. And I'm like, okay, well, they summon Shekinaga. They may have to play around it because if you have a Shaddoll card in hand, this card's also like a very, very real disruption. But let's say you have no other Shaddoll cards in hand. So this is just a body on field that they will be playing around, by the way. But let's say they completely disrespect it, say you don't have a Shaddoll card in hand. Well, in that case, you have Ecclesia and Fleur because Ash Dragon sent to the graveyard during the end phase grabs it. And they have not a lot of effective ways in the Prank Kid deck to actually deal with the defense position Ecclesia other than the token that got sent to the graveyard, because all their monsters that are over 1,500 are extra deck monsters, so Ecclesia won't die. So you can literally just hold the Fleur in hand all the way until they summon Verite, or they just won't summon Verite because like, oh, he has Fleur. So then you're able to start your turn with a Fleur in hand plus a Schism still active, and that's just off of one card, and you were able to like survive the Prank Kid combo, have 2 forms of disruption during your turn that don't go away during theirs because Schism just stays. Ability to summon Winda because you still haven't used your Ash Dragon in Graveyard. Ability to summon Construct because you've used Secure Gardener. So, that just, you don't really lose the game that this card resolves, even whenever they open, like, their God starter of the Prank Kid plus the Brave. On top of that, for starters, we play 3 copies of Dogmatica Ecclesia, 3 copies of Maximus. I opted to play 3. I had to give 1 back because I was borrowing 1. Shoutouts to Carter Wicks. But these are kind of just like more copies of a card like this. And I feel like if you have Schism plus another layer of disruption, whether it be Fleur, Punishment, even an El Shaddoll fusion during your opponent's turn, because ideally you always want to set up 2 forms of disruption with your fusion spells. That way one can summon Winda, one can summon like App Clone or Construct or Shek. Or in theory, you can even summon double Winda. That way, if they have like Imperm or Droplet type cards, you can beat it. Drawing multiple of these cards is how you do it. As well as people say, well, I don't want to hard open Maximus. And I think that's just crazy because anytime you draw Gale Dogra, Nadir Servant, Shaddoll Fusion, El Shaddoll Fusion, Aerial Hedgehog, or Ghost Ogre, Maximus is live because you can go Almirage Secure Gardener. So this card is a bomb whenever you draw it. It's an extender whenever you draw it, and it's even a starter card whenever you draw it, so I don't understand why people wouldn't play 3 copies of a card like this. In addition, if people have cards like Veiler, Impermanence, a Monster Negate, whatever it may be, and you go Special Ecclesia, they're going to do it there, or at least a majority of players do it there because they don't want to just continuously give you free cards for no reason. So the fact that I played 3 Maximus, it came up like once or twice when people negated Ecclesias, and then I just Maximus them because I play the maximum number of copies. And I play 1 Fleur, and then I play a Punishment that's later on in the deck. Fleur is really important, just because due to the nature of the deck, with 3 Maximus, 3 Ecclesia, 3 Geldarger, and Nadir, you end up sending the Ash Dragon to the graveyard a lot, so you constantly have this. For the non-engine cards, we play 3 copies of Ghost Ogre, 2 copies of Nibiru. I'm not a fan of 2 copies of Hand Traps, but previously this card wasn't in my main deck at all. It was, I don't know, it was really good for me. Maybe I should have main decked 3 and just played 43. I didn't choose 42 because I thought it was like more right or anything like that. I was just trying to figure out what I would side in and out on a round-to-round basis, and I could not for the life of me against a couple of my matchups figure out exactly how I would side. But I realized whenever I put these 2 in, the side decking got a lot easier. So I don't think this is correct by any means, but due to the nature of having to submit a list Thursday night to make sure I was pre-registered, I just ended up here and doing this. So it's probably not right. Maybe you should play 43 with Nibs. Maybe you cut Nibs from the main and you just learn how to side deck with this deck better than I did. I definitely don't think this was right though, but that's just room for improvement in the future. Now for the Shaddoll lineup. I play a lot of Shaddolls. So typically people play like a very minimalistic build, kind of like what Joe won the YCS with, where you're playing like a couple 1-of utility Shadolls. I don't think that you should do that because with cards like Gale Dogra, Maximus, Ecclesia, Punishment, cards that like make App Clone resolve, you want to draw these. In addition to thinking that El Shaddoll Fusion is the best card in this deck, you need to draw Shaddoll cards for it to be good. So I played 3 Hedgehog, 1 Aerial, 2 Squamata, 1 Beast, 1 Dragon, and 2 Wendy. This one is the best one because, or I guess you'd say these 2 are the best 2 because these are the 2 that whenever they activate, they give you another Shaddoll, meaning you always want to have a constant stream of at least 1 to 2 Shaddoll monsters in play because that way you can constantly resolve El Shaddoll Fusion during both turns of the game, every game. So that's just ideal, but Hedgehog's the best one because this is the one that can add any of them, but also can turn into Almirage Secure Gardener if need be, which sounds like, oh, that's a small detail, but it actually just isn't, because that means that it turns your Ecclesia and your Maximus into like true starter cards. So like you don't think about it like that usually, but Hedgehog plus Ecclesia is Schism plus Fleur, so that's just really, really good. So I definitely wouldn't cut down on this. Sometimes I cited the third copy out whenever I was going second. Not because I didn't think it was good, but just because, something has to come out for the non-engine that's necessary. 111. I was talking to Dominic Couch about playing 2 beasts. I ended up on 1. Didn't necessarily have a second one come up. The only benefit behind playing 2 beasts is that sometimes you want to draw a card during your turn and set a beast off of Wendy during the same turn, so you get access to both during the same time. But I do think that's marginally better than what I ended up doing, which is pretty often drawing a card off beast and then setting a second hedgehog after already resolving a hedgehog search during that turn. I think setting the beast is better, but I don't know if it's better enough to justify playing another copy of a worse card. Ariel wouldn't have played the deck without this card. This is the reason cards like DPE don't matter. I wouldn't change it. Card was insane. 2 Wendy, 2 Squamata. Wouldn't go above 2 Wendy. Most valuable part about it is that it gives you another monster and it's another attribute. Squamata, I considered playing 3, but I was already at 42 cards and I didn't want to increase the doll count too much. This card's very, very good. I mean, it's any of them, but funny enough, you think like, oh, this has to be better than like Hedgehog, right? Because this is Hedgehog, but it can also be anything else. But I don't even think that's the case, because you'll actually resolve 3 Hedgehog, like all 3 from deck, over the course of this game, versus you won't really resolve 3 Squamata, or if you do, like, you're running out of resources, because this deck isn't like an absolute flood your opponent out of the game deck typically. It's a very mid-rangey type deck. So having a card that gives you cards versus a more versatile card actually ended up better. Plus being able to make All Mirage secure with this to trigger your starters or be a light monster was really important. So Squamata is very, very good. It's one of my favorite ones to open with like Super Poly or with L during the draw phase, because it can turn into Ariel or Dragon. So maybe there's a world this ends up going to 3 eventually, but not at the cost of cutting Hedgehogs. The only world that happens is if I end up just adding another name, but not sure if I'd do that or not. Played 3 copies of Super Poly. I played 3 Shaddoll Fusion. I played 3 of the best fusion spell by a mile. Comment about this one real quick. People consider this like, oh, yeah, Shaddoll's really, really good going second because of this card. That's just not true. Shaddoll's good going second because of this card. This card is the epitome of average. It's the card that can get ashed whenever ash isn't a card that typically is too bad for this deck. I don't like my fusion spells getting ashed, because if they ash anything that I do off of this, then it's okay because I still have a card. If they ash an App Clone that I send off of Maximus or Gale Dogger, it's okay because I still have cards. If they ash this, I lose a card. And I know you can say that about bomb cards like Nadir too, but the difference is this does a lot more than this in more game states, versus this only does it whenever they have an extra deck monster, but enough of the time they don't have extra deck monsters because their decks like Flunder, Eldritch, DPEs can clear themselves off the field, so you won't have an extra deck monster. Bow Wow will clear itself off of the field, so they won't have an extra deck monster. Or you might just get Scythe, so this actually is the worst fusion spell, even though sometimes, sure, you resolve it from deck, and it's like, you win the game when you do that. I don't know, this card was subpar, but at the same time, you need Shaddoll starter cards, because you are playing a lot of cards that don't do anything on their own in the Shaddoll monsters. But, I mean, you're playing games with 5 to 6 cards in hand, so it doesn't matter that they don't do anything on their own. But still, I see people play like, oh, I'll play 3 Shaddoll Fusion, 1 L Shaddoll Fusion. I wouldn't cut down on any of these, especially because I don't think this one is nearly as good as people give it credit for. Continuing the spell lineup, I think I may have just skipped, oh, never mind, there it is. 1 Call by the Grave. Dom convinced me to put it in. It overperformed. Hitting random hand traps was cool, but this deck actually just interacts really well with hand traps. But the main thing this was good at was hitting Prank Kids, hitting Scythe, hitting random DPEs. This card just overperformed, because beforehand, to me, this was like, oh, it's cool, hand traps go first card, but I actually preferred this card going second over going first. It was in my deck during either case, but it just overperformed whenever I was going second. 3 Cosmic Cyclone. Once again, shout out to Carter. Let me borrow it. This card is better than another hand trap because, one, it can hit Scythe, but also it hits... I'd rather draw this than basically any hand trap, even a card like Ash against the Fluanderese deck, just because, you know, sometimes they can chain block around Ash, can't chain block around Cosmic Cyclone during the draw phase, hits Pandemonium during the draw phase, and then if I ever want to establish a Winda, the way most decks out Winda is the Adventurer Equip spell, and this card lets you just Cosmic the Fateful, and you don't have to worry about that, and then you can end up in those game states where Winda just blows them out, even though typically we don't like to go for Winda turn 1 because you lose a lot of cards when you do that. Sometimes when you draw cards like Cosmic, you can go for Winda, not necessarily during your turn 1, but you can go for Winda during your opponent's turn. Also helps me break the Prank Kid board, because I went 1 for 6 against my 6 Prank Kid opponents in die rolls, and I broke the board all but 2 times, I think? 2 times, 3 times? No, I broke the board all but 2 times, just due to the nature of cards like El Shaddoll, Cosmic, stuff like that. For the trap lineup, 1 Punishment, 1 Schism. Wasn't really worried about Schism getting Cosmicked. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think that's usually that game-defining, and if it is game-defining, it's usually because they're playing like a crazy combo deck, and I may, like, if I didn't have enough disruption to stop them, I think they blew me out either way, and having the second Schism to grind didn't really matter at that point. For the extra deck, and that's 42 card main. For the extra deck, I play 3 Shaddoll App Cologne. You'll typically send 1 or 2 to the graveyard just from your extra deck throughout the course of the game. Then you have 1 or 2 to summon. This card has a cool hidden effect where it can't be destroyed by battle that people just don't know for some reason. And then it negates any card, which is awesome because a lot of times when you're going second against the Prank Kid deck, you actually do have to really grind with them. So being able to negate the Fatefuls that are face up, negate the Pranks that are face up, ends up being really, really important because you like grind with that deck if you lose the die roll. I think they don't have a chance if you go first. Like, I think you just blow them out. But whenever you're going second against them, unless you like have a blowout nib or something, I do think that you end up grinding with them very often, unless you draw like Cosmic or something and just beat them that way. Played 2 Construct, played 2 Winda. Like I said, I don't really summon this card in the first or second turn of the game usually, so I didn't really need a third one at any point. Construct, the third one came up like once against an Eldritch deck, but it was like fine, like I won the game anyway, so maybe I guess it didn't come up. Yeah, it's good. If I didn't play some of the other targets that I played in the extra deck, because I play more Shaddoll monsters in the extra deck, I would probably play a third one of this. That way I have a Shaddoll monster that I can consistently send from my extra deck to my graveyard to add back fusion spells. Because a lot of times that's how you get to extra copies. If you open Gale Dogger plus one of the Dogmatic cards, is you use Squamata or Construct to Foolish whichever name you don't have. So like if you have Schism, you Foolish L. If you have L, you Foolish Schism. That way you have access to two fusion summons during your opponent's turn. So you'll use the third copy of Construct, or in my deck I play Shekinaga and Wendigo. So typically you'll send one of these because I don't play the third Construct. These cards are very important. Shaddollists don't really play these cards, or if they do, people use the argument of, well, it's just because, I don't want to say they're bad, but, you know, people say like, oh, if you played them, you're bad. You don't play this card because of its effect. This card's essentially a vanilla with a graveyard effect that adds back a Shaddoll card. You play this because it's a wind monster, so against the Fluanderese deck, it gives you a real super poly target, out to Barrier Statue, out to M-Pen, stuff like that, as well as a way to schism away cards. Randomly, you can also hit, like, Baron, you can hit, like, Shen, Griffin Rider, stuff like that, but the reason you play this card is just it's a wind monster, and it's the most likely candidate that I send from my extra deck to my graveyard. Shekinaga was really, really important. Shout out to Don Couch, because he's one of the people that helped get me on this. Yeah, Shekinaga is just existence, makes Gale Dogger a lot better. Something that didn't come up for me but can happen is the fact that like you can chain L to Gale Dogger if they like Impermit or Veilor it or something like that, and that's randomly cool. Didn't happen for me, but it's good to know that you can do that. But yeah, this mainly just existed to send Brave tokens to the graveyard. I sent Roxy's to the graveyard one time, because sending their card to the graveyard is better than windowing them, because if you window them and they have like a droplet type card, Imperm Chalice, Brave Starter, when they hadn't special summoned, you just lose cards because they out the window and you don't get anything. Versus if you're able to schism and send one of their cards to the graveyard, then even if they out the Shekinaga, like, you still cleared their cards. So that just makes for a better grind game fundamentally. 3 more fusion monsters. I played Titaniclad, a Super Poly Target. I went to this once. I don't know. It's cuttable, but I liked it. And 1 Entis. Second one came up one time, but not enough to justify me playing a second one. And then 3 Link 1s. Didn't play Verte Anaconda, which was cool because a lot of people would always play around it, like, oh, I'm sure you're playing Verte, whether you're playing the DPE pieces or not, because they just assume, oh, fusion deck, they play Verte. But this deck doesn't get a lot of extra bodies, and when it does get extra bodies, it's because it's already playing the game, and if I'm already playing the game, that means I have access to, like, fusion spells and stuff like that, in which case Verte becomes redundant. So the only thing Verte would be able to do is, like, send Super Poly, and that's just not that good. So I don't play like a high impact card like DPE, so Verte just wouldn't be good, and I don't get a lot of bodies on the field turn 1. If I was playing like the Brave Souls build, like shoutouts to oh god, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Yuri Diaz, where he's playing like Brave Souls deck, it'd be good, because you actually play Verte and DPE and stuff, but my deck doesn't get the extra monsters on field like that. It's just not fundamentally what it does, so wouldn't be as good. 15 card extra deck. Wouldn't cut any of the cards other than maybe the Super Poly Target. Third nib, sided in a lot. Maybe it should have been in the main. Not sure. 3 Twin Twister. I sided that going second against Prank Kid. It was very good. Sided against my 1 Flandres matchup. Very good. Sided 3 There Can Only Be One. Shoutouts to Elise Davis for letting me borrow these. This wasn't necessarily to be an actual trap card. I mean, I played against 2 dragons, so it was. But this is for Dragon, Flandres, and Sword Soul. But I don't have an issue against any of those decks going first. So this actually didn't go in against Dragon or Sword Soul going second. The main thing this was even in my deck for is the Flandres matchup with this deck is hard. And this was a card that I can draw going first or second that can blow out the Flandres deck. And I just needed another card like Twin Twister where I could draw it going second, but I also wanted a card I could draw going first against Flandres where if I get shifted, whether I'm going first or second, I could draw a card that means I don't just get Exodia'd out of the game. Like, I'm not saying this one card always blows them out because of unexplored wins, but this card is just a card that filled a role that no other card in the game did, because I could win the game after getting shifted, which happened in the early rounds for me. I played 1 Resh Shaddoll Fusion. This is like one of those like low cost, high reward cards where I didn't want this to be in my side deck. I didn't want it to be in my deck at all, but against random trap decks, against the Eldritch deck, against Striker, stuff like that, this card just being in your deck list makes the matchup much better because you either search it or you go Construct, send it, and then Gravity Controller this back. Trap and Fair decks cannot keep up with you constantly being able to reborn a fusion and then resolving +1s, like whether it be Construct, Ascend, and then trap decks can't really deal with big monsters like consistently like that, especially because this is another card that can activate in the draw phase. So if they've DPE'd you, you can Resh, summon back Construct, send Aerial, clear all their cards. So this card's just a card that blows out the very, very fair decks. And you don't need to draw it because it's a searchable card. So this card just being in your deck list makes a lot of matchups that aren't as popular much easier. I played 3 Gamma Driver, standard-ish, no real comments there. I didn't side this ever going first or anything like that to try and beat Ash or Droll or anything like that. 3 No Material, this went in against Dragon and Prank Kid, and underperformed 1 round, and then the other like 3 rounds it overperformed, so I'd probably side it again, assuming the meta stays looking like what it stays like right now. Granted, Despia cards are coming out, so I'm sure it changes, but it was very good for this event. They can stick them with an extra deck monster on field, so you can fuse from deck. This is one of the few hand traps you can draw whenever they draw Prank Kid plus a Brave starter, and you can still stop them from Prank Kid comboing because they always want to chain block with their Fateful Adventure. So you just no material after they get their summon, and at that point all they can really end on is DPE. And this, as mentioned, this deck isn't a deck that struggles with DPE because of being able to do things during end phase, draw phase. After they clear it, you can main phase 2 banish it. This just isn't a deck that consistently struggles with DPE, so being able to put the Prank Kid deck on just that without being able to shuffle back Meow Meow because they can't search the pranks is huge, because you just win that grind game every time. That's it for the deck. Thank y'all for sticking around for so long. I know this was a very long deck profile. I'll try and answer any questions y'all have in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel. Eric does a great job with the channel and want to always show him love. And that's about it. Top Deck Scrub signing out.